program that will be coming up very shortly on our agenda. First item on our agenda for this evening is audience communication. Is there anybody in the audience who has a blue slip who would like to give comments to the board tonight? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to our next item on our agenda. The next item on our agenda, for you folks who have joined us physically tonight at Jackson, the agenda, if you'd like one, is on the back table. If you're watching from home, you can find an agenda on the Livonia Public Schools website. If you go to livoniapublicschools.org, hover over the board tab, you can drop down to agendas and click on an agenda and follow along for this evening. The item on the agenda that we are going to be covering right now is item 2, which is our curriculum committee, and we will be hearing from our curriculum chair, Mrs. Laura.
Thank you, President Burton. And we have 2 items on our curriculum committee agenda today. Our first item, as Mrs. President Burton said, we're so excited to hear, and it's probably the favorite part of our meeting, to hear about the overview of the Jackson Center programs. And Mrs. Oquist?
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you, Mrs. Laura, and thank you, President Burton and members of the Board of Education. Well, it's very appropriate that we are here at Jackson Early Childhood Center this evening. You may know that this week is the National Week of the Young Child. So April 12th through the 18th is identified as the Week of the Young Child. And so we are so thrilled to be here this evening. I'd like to bring up Mrs. Gail Fedorenko. And Mrs. Fedorenko will be taking us through a presentation this evening about the child care programs, the Young Fives programs, and the preschool programs here at Jackson.
Thank you.
Mrs. Fedorenko?
Appreciate that. Welcome, everybody. We are so excited and honored to have you guys here at Jackson Center. We couldn't be prouder of our programs. We consider ourselves the gateway into the K-12 world, where we set the foundation for successful students for lifelong learning. We are so happy to be here and to have the opportunity to share with you a few little facts about our building, and then I'm going to turn it over to my wonderful staff. I couldn't run this building and have this program to be as successful as it is without the wonderful, talented staff that I get to spend my days with each and every day that I'm here. So it's really exciting. We have about 65 staff members who are here on a weekly basis in and out of our building. We have 576 students, all between the ages of 6 weeks and 5 years old, that we educate here in the programs that we offer through our child care, our preschool, and our Young Five program. We're very excited to be able to collaborate with the kindergarten teachers out in the district so that they can help guide our efforts, so that all of the learning that happens here is a foundation for a successful student out in the K-12 world. The teachers always like to comment that they know our Jackson students because they really have a solid foundation, and that is truly, you know, in honor of my staff and what they do, and all the parents that work with us through our PTA, and all the people that have input into our programs here. So that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Shannon McCarthy. She's going to talk a little bit about a grant that we've written to get some money for a PBIS. She's going to explain exactly what that is, and then the rest of the staff will come up and they'll say a few things to let you know just what goes on here on a daily basis. So again, welcome and thank you for coming. Shannon?
Thank you. I've been told I need to move this over a little, so. Welcome, thank you again for coming, and thank you for the staff, and it's great to see all the friendly faces. We don't usually present to adults. We're much more comfortable with an environment of little tiny people, so you'll forgive me if I stammer a little. We are in the 2nd year of our grant, and some of you might be familiar in the district. There are some buildings that have written grants through RESA for PBIS, which stands for Positive Behavior Intervention Support, and that is basically a positive behavior discipline program that we have received grant money to implement in our school. And it's all based on the positive behaviors, reinforcing those, rewarding those, and trying to not focus as much on the negative behaviors. And you each have been given a brochure here. That this is actually the brochure that we send home to our families. Part of PBIS is certainly linking home and school and the behaviors and the discipline policies. So one thing that you'll see up here is one of the main focuses on the for PBIS is the golden ticket reward system. So this is what the kids look for. This is what the kids want to earn. When they earn a certain number of these, depending on the number of days that they are in the school, they get to go to the honey pot. And if you noticed when you came in on our little snack table, you saw our honey pot there. And when they get to go to the honey pot, that is a very good day. And so what we like to coin the phrase around here, golden ticket behavior. So when we catch them doing the great things, the positive things, being kind, being responsible, being respectful, we reward them with golden ticket behavior, for that golden ticket behavior. So this is a little system that we use, and the kids get to count their tickets and watch them accumulate. Another way that we reinforce is with little purple notes home that the teachers can quickly jot down a positive behavior that they saw that day and then stick it in the child's mailbox or cubby to go home. So the parents instantly will know what positive behavior we caught them doing at school. And then also we have little postcards because little kids love to get mail. So we have little postcards that we've made up, and we try to mail these out and give just the kids another form of reinforcement for their golden ticket behavior. One of the wonderful things that we are very proud of here at Jackson Center is we are basically the only early childhood school in Wayne County that is receiving this grant. It's very, very important for Wayne County and for RESA to have a model building that they can bring outside schools to come and learn from and walk through. We already have had some early childhood schools come and walk through and see how we're implementing this program throughout our entire building. And that's our goal, to be the early childhood model school and bring the light to Livonia Public Schools, bring the light to Jackson Center, so that we are showing that if you positively reward these children for their positive behavior, it might decrease some of the negative behavior. Next one, Nance. All right, so now I am going to introduce Laura Schaefer, who is one of our Young Fives teachers, and she's going to talk a little bit about curriculum.
Good evening. Like Shannon mentioned, we're used to talking to the little people, so might be a little intimidating tonight. But I'm just going to talk a little bit about the curriculum. This is our Phonics, which many of the really cool thing about Phonics is that many of the kindergartens or even in many of the K-12s use the Phonics model. So it really feeds into the K-12 buildings, especially the kindergarten buildings. So basically what this program is it's for all of our learners. It's for the kinesthetic, it's for the auditory, for the visual learners. There is a letter, an animal that represents each letter. So for example, honey horse, as you can see, there is a horse that makes the H, and then the model is representing this. So it would say honey horse says ha, ha, ha. So all the parts of their body, they're seeing it, they're acting out, and they're saying it together. So it's really good for those young learners. We start with the 3-year-olds and just show them the pictures. For example, alligator, they know it's an alligator. It makes an A, but they might not even notice that just to begin with. Then it goes further on to representing the letter, and then we kind of take the pictures away, and they still kind of have that picture in their minds as they move forward. This is each week we focus on one letter, so this is a project that the students do make so they can take it home, and we have that homeschool collaboration, which is so important for the learners in our school, especially at such a young age. You know, it's really hard to get involved in the schools and things like that, so that's what's really fun. The children really like Phonics. Many of the parents will say, oh my goodness, that's all I hear about is Bubba Bear or Timothy Tiger. If you see a tiger at the zoo, oh, that's Timothy, we're done. So the parents learn it very quickly. If the children are teaching the parents, you know, that's a fun way for them to learn. So this is just one of the classes making any interim, which is the letter I. It also goes in to help with beginning reading skills, which is very important. As you can see, the word hat is made out with the letters, so they can see, you know, they might forget, you know, at such a young age what H makes, but once they see that honey horse, they may not be thinking about the letter, but they can say ha, at, hat and know that it stretches out to make hats. So, which is very important. Our young learners in this building, in the young fives and even the 4-year-old preschool, are at about 32 sight words right now, which really feeds into that kindergarten, really bridging the, like Shannon had mentioned before, we're really, trying to build the foundation and to feed them into Livonia Public Schools and work with the kindergarten teachers to make this. This is just some of our young fives doing everyday math, which we do follow. The preschool has the everyday math, and then the young fives typically follow the kindergarten curriculum just at a slower pace. So in this example, they're just representing 12, but they're representing that it's 1-to-1 correspondence and using the tens frame, which whenever I personally talk to kindergarten teachers, that's really hard for them to use a tens frame and to notice 10 objects. They might be able to count to 10, but not necessarily recognize that there's 10 objects there. So basically just following the kindergarten curriculum at a slower pace, which I've heard from many kindergarten teachers that it really, gets them ready. And for example, if we introduce a ruler to them, they're not sitting there in kindergarten, oh my gosh, a ruler? I want to play with this. They really know what is the purpose of it and what it's going to be useful for. This is Finger Phonics is a program that we follow. It's a fine motor program. So really, it's very important at this age for them to develop the fine motor skills as they're beginning to write and things like that. They may know a letter, but if they can't get it down on paper, it's very tricky for them and they get kind of discouraged. So in this example, they are using tweezers, I believe. The light's kind of funny. They're using tweezers to move pom-poms. So when we say that pretend the pom-poms are so hot you can't touch them. So they're really getting those fine motor, strengthening those hands, to develop as they begin writing and reading in the future. And Miss Nancy, anything else? All right, and now I'm going to turn it over to Nancy Yost from the Western Wayne Skills Center. Thank you.
Hello, I am Nancy Yost, and I'm a teacher at the Western Wayne Skills Center. And I have been working with young adults for 25 years, so I have no problem talking to adults. But I also have had the wonderful privilege of being able to work in this building and be around little kids, and it's just an amazing thing. So I'm going to get to what my class does here in the building in a short little while, but as we look through some of these next photos, you'll see once in a while a student with a purple shirt on like this. I also wear my purple shirt. I want anyone in the building to know that this is our uniform, and I'm in the halls all the time. Parents see me, and I can peek in a room and I can spot my student in a second, make sure I know where they're at. So from my perspective, the whole building of Jackson Center sort of looks like this table configuration. And right now we're right about here in the gym. And you guys are in the child care plus preschool hallway. This hallway is just preschool young fives, where parents are going to drop off for 3 hours, go away, and come back and pick up. This hallway, they get dropped off and not picked up again until later on. So we're eating there, we're taking naps there in that hallway. So, and I think that's important that you understand. Sometimes people think that hallway is just daycare. Well, it's not. It's everything that's going on in the preschool hallway plus the extra care with the eating and the sleeping. So I'm going to go through some of these pictures, and most of these are coming from the child care wing on that side. But I think it's important that people understand that our little ones are getting circle time. And we have maybe 12 babies assigned to the room. You only see 4 there because they're on their own schedule. Someone maybe's diapers getting changed, someone's sleeping, and what have you. But as many as them are going to gather, they're gathering. They're doing a felt board story. And look at, they're paying attention. Okay, next one. And here they are doing sensory activities. And this looks so much better when it was dark. I apologize. But their hands are in that Cool Whip, and they're tasting it, and they're feeling it. And who knows what Miss Amy's going to put out for them the next day to feel, kind of a thing. But that one's really cute. Okay, next one. Here we have circle time with 1-year-olds. These children are learning how to sit, and this is my spot. They all have their own little sit-upon, and they're singing the same songs every morning, their good morning song, and it's just wonderful. One thing that we know from research is that our children's young brains between birth and about age 3 in that area you want to inundate them with language and activities and stuff, and these children are just surrounded with it. Okay, next one. Now we have our 2-year-olds. And just imagine, by the time they're in kindergarten, they're used to the routine of school and taking turns and waiting their turn. Most of the classrooms, ages 3 and up, both hallways, have some sort of jobs board or a special helper for the day. Helps the children feel very involved in the daily running of their class and taking responsibility and that sort of thing. The weather helper, the line leader, those kinds of things. And most of what, if you notice what we're talking about, our children, they're either doing something with fine motor skills, gross motor skills, or language. And so there's a lot, boy, if it's not the right below temperature thing, where they're outside, it's very important that they get outside. So 2-year-olds might be more together in a group, they're holding their little donut rope. Next slide, please. All the way up to our oldest kids, the young 5 classroom, playing outside. You'll see my student right there. One of the things that my class being in the building brings is young men. Most of, I don't think besides Mr. Terry, all the staff at this program, they're women. And so I have several young men in my class, and the children just love it. We need staff supervising the big picture, but it's also nice to have an adult in there playing and supervising at the same time. A lot of sensory activities going on. This is from the 2-year-old room, and daily, if not every other day, there's something in there that they got to feel and touch. It could be noodles with gross stuff in it, or you never know what with Miss Gretchen. We're on this half from that curtain over is the big open gym, running, shooting baskets, doing stuff with parachutes. Click. And then when the blue curtain is closed, that side is our gross motor room, or the climbing room that the kids call it. And it's all getting those muscles moving. This next part well, you'll see. This picture combines, not only do we have an awesome library here that the children visit, as part of their weekly routine, but once a year Clifford comes to do Read to Me Week, which is really cool. We do a parade for just about everything here at Jackson Center. We've got the Halloween parade, click. We've got the Thanksgiving Day parade, homemade pumpkin pies. We have a holiday sing-along, and I'd just like to point out that, yes, that is me. And those are my students. We lead the sing-along, and my young gal right here, I'd like to tell you a little bit about later, if there's a second, who plays the piano for us. And then Mr. Nelson's Safari Animals. Yes, that's a big, huge python named Banana Split. And then we're just going to pause right here. So back to, and I did put together this little purple handout. So what hit me the one night was this. Oh my goodness, this building, and I challenge us, let's try to think of another building in the district that has babies. We don't have any 6-week-olds, but they're, maybe a couple month olds or whatever. And I have 26-year-olds in my class. And I don't think any other building in our district has that. And so my old students are here helping to educate the little ones coming up in the district, and it's just a beautiful thing. Okay, now I could talk forever about the Skills Center, but that's a whole nother presentation. But what I would just really like to do is quickly run through a series of pictures that show you what my students do for the program here, and what the program here does for my students. It's like, we need each other, but we know we can survive without each other. Fridays, we don't come here at all. So all the things that you're going to hear my students do, they're all on their own on Fridays when we don't come. Making the cots, getting the lunches, opened up, and running errands and die cutting for them and this kind of thing. So every Friday they remind, by Monday they're like, oh my God, why don't you guys come on Fridays? Which is really nice to hear. But it's important that you know that we do have a back at the ranch. So I call it, let's go back to the ranch, back at the Skills Center, which is on Ann Arbor Trail just west of Merriman. And I have a very small classroom there. You can see our class motto. We help keep children safe, happy, and quiet. I have 12 students in the morning, and then we go back for lunch, and I come back with 12 different students. And we come, we put our coats away, and then everyone disappears. We have a student helping in the 1-year-old room. We have a student in the baby room. We have a student in that whole wing has my students in it. Then we have a series of promotions. If you've been with me for a year and you're doing a real nice job, then I promote you to the preschool hallway. And the reason it's a promotion is because I hardly don't go down the preschool hallway. They don't need me. They're very much increasing their independence and that kind of thing. So let's just see what we do. Go ahead and click. Here we have Miranda's opening up some packages, and there's all those licensing rules. We got to wear the gloves. We're often the people after lunch and after snack time doing the cleaning of the tables. And because it's a licensed facility, you can't just grab a rag and wipe the table. You got to use 3 spray bottles and da-da-da-da-da-da. But that's what my students need, some concrete tasks that they can learn that. They can, learn to remember how to do that. Next slide. There we have some, there's another adult in the room sitting down with a kid and looking at a book together. Next slide. The baby room. If you really understand the licensing, and I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but for every 4 babies, there's 1 adult.
That is the right ratio.
Okay, and can you imagine 12 babies? What's that, 3 adults? Oh my gosh, right? This one needs a diaper, that one needs to be fed, and that one needs a nap so bad, right? So by having another adult student trainee in the room, she's often the one making sure this one, who's more mobile than that one, doesn't crawl up on top of her kind of a thing, and she can go and move kids and this kind of thing. So it's very nice. Okay, next one. Oh, there's Mr. Terry. We have a custodial helper. Every afternoon for the last several years, Mr. Terry gets a custodial helper from me, and this student gets all the preschool halls that don't have a PM class. My student learns his routine. I clean room 10, and then I do 4, and then I do 3, or whatever it is. And he's on his own doing it, and then extra jobs around the place, and it's really helpful. We also took over the die cutting just about in the whole building. Do you remember Mrs. Fedorenko said there's how many kids come through here a week?
576.
Okay, now remember the Phonics thing and how many letters are in the alphabet? 26? Times 500 and whatever? Who's doing the die cutting of those letters? Well, Miss Jennifer did a majority of them this school year. That's her job. She fills the order and then she's delivering it. She's having to knock on doors and talk to adults and, this kind of thing. So this has been an awesome thing. We also have Jaden. If I find out my student has a skill and the center can benefit from it, I'm going to run with it. This young man is very creative, and a lot of times the kids or the staff are decorating. We need to blow a picture up bigger. And he learned how to use the opaque machine, but his penmanship and his lettering, and it's just beautiful. Then the next one, then the kids color it. Next. And then it ends up looking like that. And the kids just love it. And there's all kinds of princesses, and he recently did some tiger things and that kind of thing. So that's cool. Now this is one final student that I would just like to showcase. Her name's Autumn, and she is blind. And when I first heard she wanted to come to my class, I'm like, Autumn, you can't see. How are you going to help keep an eye on the kids, right? But I found out she has this amazing piano ability, and she already knew hundreds of children's songs, and I didn't have to teach her a thing about the piano. I know nothing about it. But what I've done is help teach her how to be a visiting music lady, and her keyboard's on a moving cart. She has a schedule in the building, and on Mondays at 8:45, I go to room 4, and I play for them. And the teachers can just say, play this song, and she'll play it. Play that song. She knows them all. And if she doesn't know it, she'll go home and look it up on YouTube and learn how to play it just from listening. That Phonics, the reading curriculum in the building, well, it came with a CD, a music CD, and there's a song. And I wish I knew it, but I was blocking my, we all live at the zoo. Well, Autumn took the CD home and learned how to play it. And so now when Autumn does her visiting music schedule, she's playing the song that supports the school's reading curriculum. It's just beautiful. It's amazing. And she's been playing at our holiday sing-alongs, and she volunteered here last summer. She's planning on doing it again. So it's just wonderful, and thank you. And anytime you want to hear more, and you guys want to leave work and just come over here for a little bit and hear more and see us in action, just call Ms. Fedorenko. We'd love to have you.
Thank you, Nancy.
Sounds great.
Thank you.
Thank you. As you can see, this is a very dynamic building. We're rarely sitting around. We're moving with the kids. We're moving, doing all kinds of things, and it's just a really fun place to be. As you can see, my staff is very excited. They're very passionate about early childhood, and it is an honor and a privilege to get to work with them every day. As you can see, based on the PowerPoint that they've created for you, there's just so many opportunities here for our learners. dependent on whether they're visual learners, auditory learners, kinesthetic learners, whatever their learning style is, we strive very hard to meet all of those here to make them successful lifelong learners when they get out into the K-12 world. So thank you so much for coming to Jackson Center. We really appreciate the opportunity that you've afforded us to have a glimpse into our world and to see what it is we do. And thank you so much for coming to see us tonight. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you so much for hosting us, and staff, thank you for an excellent, very informative, enthusiastic presentation. It was fantastic. Do board members have any questions or comments? Okay, with that, we'll go on to the next agenda item, which is a request to purchase with a state grant text-to-speech software. Mrs. Ellis?
Thank you very much, Mrs. Laura. Good evening, everyone. Well, today was day one of M-STEP testing for grades 5, 8, and 11 throughout the state. We had 900 students in our district who took at least one of the tests today, and except for just a couple of hiccups or minor glitches, which were definitely surmountable, we had a very successful first day of testing. I am keeping my fingers crossed that the remaining 8 weeks of testing will go as smoothly as our first day did. Our M-STEP test does allow a support for students that's called text-to-speech, and that allows the text to be read to students. And that support is available for both gen ed and special education students. And to provide this experience for our students prior to taking the test, we are bringing to the board a recommendation to purchase a text-to-speech software program. Our Student Services Department have researched several text-to-speech programs, and the one that we are bringing to you tonight, that we are recommending to you, is called Snap and Read Universal. This software program not only includes text-to-speech, but also the ability to adjust the text in the documents to the student's reading level. It also provides unlimited use by both students and staff members. It includes take-home rights, free upgrades, free tech support, and free webinars. If the board agrees to the purchase, we will provide the software program on all of the student computers in each of our K-12 schools. The Student Services Department looked at different packages for the program, and the one that we are bringing to you tonight is a 3-year license for the total amount of $30,046. That is a savings over a single-year license of about $1,000 per year. Our IT department has reviewed this purchase. They support its purchase, and they've also confirmed to us that our computers do have the capacity to run the software program. Funds for this purchase will come from the district's Technology Readiness Infrastructure Grant. These are state funds that the district receives to prepare for M-STEP testing. And this software program is definitely a purchase that supports student readiness for M-STEP testing. Joining me tonight is Mrs. Jennifer Terrio, our Administrator of Student Services, and she and I would be very happy to respond to any questions that board members may have.
Any questions or comments? Mr. Centers?
Ms. Ellis, am I correct in assuming that this will be available to students for use this year, or is this for future years?
It would be for future years.
Okay.
Okay. Anyone else? President Burton.
And you said this is for students in both the general ed program and the special education program?
That's accurate because the accommodation text-to-speech support that's available during M-STEP testing for our students is available for both general education and special education students.
Okay.
So we're going to make this experience available for both gen ed and special ed students.
And that's kind of where I was going next with it. Aside from the testing component of it, how would you envision this being used on a non-testing day for our students?
For students who are reading below grade level, this would provide them an opportunity to have text read to them at their reading level.
Okay. All righty. Thank you.
Yes.
Mrs. Jarvis?
Thank you. Does this use headphones or something? I'm just envisioning
Yes.
a classroom with everybody having this
It
out
used
loud.
headphones or earbuds.
And do we have enough?
For testing purposes, yes. We provided all of our schools with earbuds for this year's M-STEP testing to, in addition to the headphones that some schools already have both in their classrooms and in their computer labs.
Thank you. Mrs. Ellis, how many students at one particular time can have access to this program? Is it just going to be in our libraries, or is it going to be in individual classrooms? How would this work?
It will be a software program that would be on every student computer, so it would have unlimited access.
Oh, that's wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. Thank you.
Any other? Mr. Johnson. Still can't get used to it.
Thank you. I'm trying to envision how this works. It takes text and it reads the text and turns it into audible sound?
Yes, that's
Correct.
exactly what it does.
Yes, you will the student will highlight text, and the program will read it back to the student. And then if you choose it to read it at a lower level, then the program will read certain words at an easier level for the student to understand.
Does the text have to be in a certain format, such as a PDF or WordPerfect, or?
It reads any text.
It reads any, okay. Oh, good. Okay, thank you.
Mrs. Jarvis?
Is it limited to English?
That's a great question.
We will find out.
We will find out.
It'd be wonderful in the foreign language program.
Any other questions or comments? Are we all in agreement that this will go on the agenda for our regular meeting of April 20th? Okay. With that, President Burton, that concludes the curriculum committee.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda is item 3, Building and Site Committee, and Mr. Johnson will be chairing that.
Thank you, President Burton. If you'll recall, a while back, we decided to sort of take a forward look at some of the repairs that we might need over the next 5 to 10 years that weren't included in the bond issue. And we're looking more through our sinking fund, and we talked about perhaps at that time engaging Plant Moran Cressa to help us with that. And I think we're ready to move forward, and I will turn it over to Ms. Sabby.
Thank you so much, Mr. Johnson. Yeah, I think you summarized it very well. As you know, as part of the 2013 bond process, we went out and assessed all of our buildings and put together our 2013 bond. And you'll recall that, of course, we came up with many more projects than we actually put forward to our very generous voters. And some of those items, just as an example, would be parking lots, roofs, and boilers. Those are some of the things that we are not doing as part of our renovation with the 2013 bond upgrades in the next 5 years. And we're well aware of some of those things and looking forward, upgrading and continuing on with the long-term facility plan, with having, again, the generous community putting forward the sinking fund and passing that again on our last go-around for the next 5 years. We thought it would be prudent to, again,
take an assessment of all of our facilities, step back, look at where we are, look at, for example, the years, how old are our roofs, when are they going to need repair? You know, what's the structure of our parking lots right now? How much work do we really need to do? Where exactly are our boilers? Will they last 3 years, 5 years, 10 years? Again, look at all of those items, prioritize them in terms of need and finances, again, and then bring that plan back to the Board of Education so we continue to have an ongoing plan of how we will continue to maintain our facilities and use our resources the most efficiently and effectively. So where we would like to start with that process is assessing every single LPS facility and see, again, what are the age of the boilers, what does the roof look like, and get that into a document, frankly, that provides us a way to start to prioritize how to use our resources. So to do that, of course, we have to have someone go do all that work and get out into all of our schools. And Mr. Terrio is sitting next to me, and I don't need to tell all of you that the Plant Moran Cressa, our owner's representative on the bond issue, has already gotten to know almost all of our buildings very well. Paul's been in, I think, just about every single building. When I said we're meeting at Jackson today, he said, "You know where that is?" He goes, "Yeah." So it makes sense. It's a much more efficient process. Again, they're well aware of how our structure is, as well as working with our staff. We have a great deal of confidence in their ability to do this efficiently and effectively, and it makes sense to us to hire them to continue on with the process that they're doing now. We did put together in your packet the proposal from Plant Moran Cressa. I think it's pretty straightforward. I think it was just a little over $30,000 for that process, which I'm going to let Paul describe in detail, but is, again, putting together and updating our long-term facility plan. So I'll go ahead and let Paul talk about what that looks like. They've done that at a lot of districts and a couple just recently.
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. So just to get into a little bit more of the specifics of what would be entailed, really we'd be sitting down with the maintenance department and with the business department and going through the original assessments that were put together in order to put the bond together, kind of using that as a starting point, and then layering in the work that we've done last year and then again this year as part of the bond project. Believe it or not, we're already getting ready to start walking buildings this week to design for 2016. So we want to make sure that with all these different moving pieces and parts, to make sure we have a very clear understanding of what's in the bond, what's not in the bond, what's on the facility department's list to tackle over the next year or two, and then what's not, and try to make sure we fill in all the gaps and really leave no stone unturned. So, if you want to take this building as an example, we would come out, meet with the building principals or the main user groups. Sometimes that's just custodians and principals. Sometimes it's different staff people if there's different programs in a building like this one. We'd really go up on the roof, go out in the parking lots, walk the sites, look at the envelope, look at the interior finishes. I just quickly walk down the hallway there, and you can tell by looking in that there's obviously some old 9x9 floor tiles which need to have the environmental consultant out to take a look at them. Obviously, we've got windows and things that need to be addressed and maybe could be done a little bit differently. So we'd be really looking at everything from architectural to mechanical to electrical, not destructively tearing things apart to look at them, but really just walking through and doing a kind of a cursory overview in order to put some budget numbers and scope of work items together, building by building by building. And I wish I had brought a copy of the report, but we just did a similar report for Rochester Community Schools, and I can tell you it was it was about this thick, and there was probably 10 times as many pictures that weren't in the report. So it's pretty thorough. There may be, if we end up, for instance, with the roofs, if we can't find out when they were installed, what kind of warranties they have on them, we may need to hire a roofing consultant at some later date to come out and drill holes into the roofing substructure to find out how thick the insulation is and how old the membrane is and things like that. But this would really be an overview of everything in the district, all the facilities in the district, in order to come up with a game plan for the next 5 to 10 years, because we know the bond will only do so much, the sinking fund will only do so much as those mills are levied. We really want to set the district up for the next 10 years to make sure you guys have a great game plan going forward. So.
Okay, any questions, comments?
I do.
Trustee McDonald.
I apologize, but I don't think the board received a copy of the costs breakdown.
Proposal? Okay, if not, I can get that out to you.
I'm sorry, I have a copy. I could run copies in the office if needed.
Okay. That'd be great. Yep.
Sorry. This was actually, I should have mentioned, was actually presented back in October at the October board meeting, but we had tabled it until we got everything squared away with this year's award. So I apologize for not bringing copies, but I can go run them before I leave.
Okay. That'd be great, then we'll all have them.
I do have one additional question, Paul.
Sure.
So you're just basically going to do an assessment of each building, just so I understand, and then just give the board a recommendation based on that assessment as to what needs to be done in a prioritized manner?
Yeah, I kind of glossed over that too quickly probably, but usually what we do is we try to get everything onto one big list, right? So let's put everything that needs to be done over the next 10 years, whether it's, and even sometimes things are on there that you wouldn't expect. You know, carpet that's only 5 or 6 years old might look great now, but in 10 more years, it's not going to have any useful life left and it needs to be replaced. Same thing with mechanical equipment. You could look at something that was just replaced 10 years ago and it's great now, but in 10 years, it's going to need to be replaced again. So we try to look at everything holistically, and then we usually break it into 3 different categories. It kind of varies depending on how the district wants it, but typically it's critical need, which are life safety, building code, fire marshal type issues, things that have to be fixed immediately to keep the building operational and up to snuff. And then deferred maintenance, which are things that need to be done but could probably be deferred for 3 to 5 years, 6 years, depending on, you know, other priorities and the useful life that's left in those pieces of equipment. And then property enhancement is kind of the third category. That's more like 7 to 10 year items, and it could also be things that the district wants to take on that are not just renovating the existing building, but it could be putting a classroom addition on, it could be putting a multi-purpose room on, or some other major kitchen renovation, or something that is a nice to have, not necessarily a must have. So we really try to sit down with that report once we have everything on one big giant spreadsheet essentially, and then prioritize things with the administration team to make sure that things are the way they should be. And then really the way we set this up is it's really a living, breathing document. The minute that we have it done, it's going to change, and we know that. So we try to make it flexible so that when something changes, you can go back the next year and cross those things off the list, and it'll automatically change the cash flow for you and show you, okay, we've got $4 million to spend in 2018. Well, here's the $7 million worth of projects we want to do. Cross those off the list, move on to the next year, and it's really pretty convenient, I think, and pretty good. So it's worked well for us in the past with a lot of other districts. So.
Okay, any other?
I just have one more question, and I apologize, President Burton. So would you be handling the sinking fund monies and the bids like you do for the bond, or would this just be strictly an overview and an assessment of the buildings?
That would be a second discussion at the board level. So this piece of it is just the assessment piece of it. And then if we decide that we would like Plant Moran to act as an owner's rep on the sinking fund, we would bring a separate proposal for that to the Board of Education. So we would talk about what the fees were and how we would want to structure that, exactly the same, a little bit different, you know, we would have that discussion.
Right.
So this is strictly for the assessment
Just
at
for the
this point.
assessment?
And then once we have that, we can have that discussion if the board would like to.
Okay.
Thank you. That's it?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. President Burton.
Yes, you mentioned Rochester's enormous document. Recognizing the difference between board oversight and administration day-to-day level, is the board going to have a condensed version of that and the administration have the nitty-gritty detail, or not?
Typically, public schools are, you know, public entities. So what we did in that case is we actually posted it onto eBuilder. So we set up a folder that was a publicly viewable folder. If you had the login, you could log in and see it. So we could do it that way. And like I said, because it's kind of a living, breathing document, that might make some sense to have it out on the cloud somewhere so that people can view it when need be. As soon as you put it out there, everybody wants to know what's in it for their building, of course. So you got to deal with that side of it. But you know, it's just a game plan. It does change. So.
Okay.
But yeah, I'd expect to share the thing with everybody that wants to see it. So.
Okay. And it's, yeah, I mean, because I don't know that we need that much detail at the board level, you know, 10 years in advance, but yet an overview is certainly.
Yeah, there's a lot of different, once you have everything kind of grouped together, there's a lot of different ways you can summarize the data, which makes it pretty convenient to look at it at a high level. And we actually end up getting a lot of good information sometimes too, depending on how far we take it. You can start looking at, you know, how many students are in each building, where they're spaced throughout the district, and you can do a lot of things with the data, you know, other than just the assessment, if you chose to do that. So.
Okay. And Dr. Leopold, this may be more of a question for you. If I'm not mistaken, we had a 10-year facility plan back a handful of years. I imagine a lot of the data that we're looking for is going to be used from that document also, and in incorporation with the physical walk of the building as they stand today.
Correct. Yeah, we've done multiple assessments over the last many years, and so this is really just the ongoing work of updating those assessments and taking a fresher look at it. As Lisa mentioned, we did it most recently in our 4 years of planning up to the bond issue, and we actually had done it prior to that also, and so, but we definitely think it is time to do it again. And with Cressa's knowledge of our buildings, it just makes sense for us to have them do that work for us this time around.
And with that knowledge too of having what's going to be done with the bond. And so
Right.
then what, so you can think about, some schools that we may not get to for 2 or 3 years. Crest is going to have that understanding, so they know they don't have to go in there and say, replace the carpeting or replace the tile. That's going to be done with the bond issue.
Right.
So we understand what will be done with those resources, and so what won't be done with those resources, or what other things have come up since we planned for the bond. Has there been a boiler that's been, not working as efficiently as it should be, or something like that? So
Yep.
those kinds of things, in that coordination of those two, both what's happening today and then what we expect to happen in the next 3 years and 4 years, and then ongoing. Okay.
Yeah, and those assessments that have been done in the past and the knowledge we have of the district certainly makes our costs a lot lower, because, basically it equates to hours. And if we have a great starting point with all the work that's been done in the past by the board and the administration, and then we have the knowledge of what's going on in the bond currently, it helps us get done more efficiently and effectively, so.
Okay.
When we start at zero, it's a lot harder process, for sure.
Yeah, we're definitely not starting at zero.
We are not.
Yeah, we've been around our buildings.
Yep,
All righty, thank you.
you're welcome.
Okay.
I'm all set, thank you.
I know Mr. Centers had questions.
Actually, one for Lisa and one for Paul. Lisa, the survey itself can be paid using sinking fund money? Is that correct? Okay. Is that what our general plan is? Okay, thanks. And then Paul, what is the timeline for this if we were to vote on it, in the next voting meeting? When can we see this implemented and really get the good results from it?
So, great question. I don't want to give you an end date quite yet, but
Yeah.
as far as getting started, we'd like to get started right away. I want to say there's a lull, but there's a little bit of a chance to catch our breath between getting everything awarded the last 2 months and summer construction starting. So we'd really like to get started here in April and May, and then we'll probably need June as well to get through all the rest of the buildings once the students are out. But I would hope that sometime this summer we could get you a final report that would be pretty comprehensive and help us plan then for any work that would want to be done in 2016, so.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Centers. Any other questions or comments? Just one question, Lisa. How can we get a copy of the cost either tonight or first thing tomorrow and
I'll
get it
make one
out to
before I
all
go.
board members?
I'll make one before I go.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right, great. Thank you, Paul. Thanks for being here. Thank you,
You're
Lisa. And
So we'll go ahead and put that on the next voting meeting agenda. And again, if you have any questions, the copy, as Paul mentioned, is going to be the same thing that you saw in the fall. So it'll be a review for you, but if you have any questions when you get a chance to relook at it, please make sure to let Lisa or Paul know, and we'll make sure to get any questions answered prior to our voting meeting.
thank you. And, President Burton, that's it for building and site.
All righty. The next item on our agenda is item 4, Finance Committee, and we'll be hearing from Mrs. Jarvis.
Thank you, President Burton. I would like to welcome Mrs. Abbey to speak to us about more bid results from our bond issue. Excuse me. Tonight we have the exciting opportunity to look at bid results on marching band musical instruments.
We do. Thank you very much again. We did have a brief discussion at our study session, and I did give you a little bit of a heads up in your board packet that we were bringing this forward tonight. Let me give you just a little bit of background. I'm also going to play Steve Archibald tonight as well, so I get to do both roles. So I'll do my best to represent Mr. Archibald. As you know, as part of the 2013 bond, we are replacing musical instruments across the district. What we're bringing you tonight is just the first proposal. This is for marching band equipment at the 3 high schools. We will be bringing in the future as we go forward secondary concert instruments, elementary pianos, and the remaining K-12 program needs and updates. So tonight, again, you're just seeing the first phase for the 3 high school marching bands. I think we had mentioned, and Steve had updated, that this process for getting that list of marching band equipment that needs to be replaced was a cooperative effort between our teacher leaders in the music program, Heather Wickman at the secondary level, working with the marching band directors and other staff. You did get that list in your packet of what the equipment was that we're purchasing. I think it's a little over 60 items that we're looking at for the 3 schools. We did do a formal RFP for the equipment, so it went on Bid for Michigan, our website, and then we sent it out to several local music companies that we're aware of, that were recommended to us from staff. You do have in the packet that I just gave you the results of the bids. We had, the bids were due last Friday, so that's why I'm sorry it wasn't in your packet any earlier. I'll talk about timing in just a second. But you do have in front of you the recommendation for the marching band. We had 3 bids, Marshall Music at $50,104, Music and Arts Center out of Maryland for $46,318, and Washington Music Center out of Maryland for $44,968. Marshall Music is here in Lansing, Michigan. The middle bid vendor unfortunately missed 2 items on the list, or actually did a no bid for 2 items on the list, so we won't be considering their bid. And what we would like to do is talk about our recommendation actually to purchase the equipment from Marshall Music. There is a little over $5,100 difference. It's actually not the low bid, as you can see. But Marshall Music, a couple of reasons that we're making this recommendation tonight. First of all, Marshall Music is a company that is local and Livonia Public Schools has worked with for many, many years. They currently service our district. We've purchased equipment from them many times, so we're very aware of the quality of the equipment and how it gets to us. Also, what we have right now with Marshall Music is they come into the district once a week, and they will pick up any damaged equipment to take back to be repaired, and then they drop off any equipment that they would have had repaired. So that would be just sort of our normal ongoing basis in terms of our current equipment, as well as if we've had any new purchases over the last several years that might still be under a manufacturer's warranty, they will also pick up that equipment and take care of getting that equipment replaced if it's necessary. Now, that's not a big item. You don't have a ton of equipment that's under manufacturer warranty that needs to be replaced, but it does happen from time to time. So they would take on that responsibility as well. The company that would be the low bid that's in Maryland, if we do have any manufacturer returns for any reason whatsoever, thank you, we would actually have to package that up ourselves and ship that to Maryland. So, I mean, we have our ongoing costs of just getting things boxed up and mailed through, as well as the actual shipping costs and loss of time. The other thing that Marshall will do for us from time to time when they have equipment available is if we do have to give them something to be repaired or shipped back, if they have it available, they'll actually give us some loaner equipment, which is also a very nice feature. So that is very handy. Again, we do feel because of the efficiency and effectiveness of using a local company to actually provide us that ongoing service, we do feel like this does meet our qualifications for a lowest responsible bidder on a long-term basis. So although the equipment is a little bit lower bidder, we do feel like there are other things to take into consideration when we make a recommendation for a vendor, and service and efficiency for our staff, and potentially the cost of not having to ship equipment would meet those requirements. So we're very happy with Marshall Music. I did have a discussion with both our operations department and again with Ms. Wickman, our teacher leader that oversees this, and they were very supportive of that, going forward with using Marshall. So with that, I'll answer any questions.
Mrs. Benefield.
Thank you, Mrs. Jarvis. Mrs. Abby, if we did decide to go with Washington, would we forego the service from Marshall? Would we have to pay them an additional fee? How would that work with equipment that we haven't purchased through in the case that we didn't purchase the equipment through Marshall, how would that work with that service plan?
I would think that they would continue on with those things that need to be repaired, that they would continue to handle that for us. This would certainly, this type of equipment is equipment they service since they sell it, so.
Okay.
It would be more the manufacturers, during that
Warranties
warranty
and
period,
stuff,
so.
okay.
President Burton.
Thank you. Mrs. Abbey, Marshall Music I get the impression that free service that we're getting from them is on an ongoing basis, not on a one-year contract or a two-year contract or
Right.
something along this line.
It's just what we've always done with them. That's just been their process with us. So obviously, we pay for repairs that aren't under a manufacturer warranty, but so they come, they pick up the equipment, take it back, get it repaired, send us an invoice, bring the equipment back.
Okay, and provide a loaner for our students, so
Yeah,
our students do not lose out on any educational time
Right.
while that
When they can.
repair is being done.
Yeah, when they have equipment available.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Any other questions? Mrs. McDonald.
Thank you, Mrs. Jarvis. Now, Ms. Abbey, in the request for bid, we put it listed on there that the board has the option to determine the lowest and responsible bidder.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Just making sure.
It's a good question.
Yeah.
It is a part of our standard process, yeah.
Right.
President Burton.
And just for the benefit of the public too, several months ago, we had requests from a lot of parents and students in the marching band that even though the original plan was to, if I'm not mistaken, was to provide these band instruments at the time the auditorium renovations were being done or close to that, but the request was brought forth that we provide these instruments ahead of time if possible.
Right.
And I'd just like to point out to the public that the administration was not only listening to that, but able to be responsive to it. And sometimes they're listening and they're not able to be responsive. This time, it was something that was a reasonable request and it was doable. So I'd like to thank our administration for going out of the way to take things out of the original planned order in order to make sure that our students have these instruments as soon as they can.
Mr. Archibald says thank you, because that was his work. And the work of the staff. So we expect, if the board does approve that at our next voting meeting, delivery sometime 4 to 6 weeks. So that will get us maybe even a little bit ahead of our time frame of mid-June, so.
Okay.
Excellent. Any other questions regarding the musical instruments? Can we add it to the agenda? Thank you.
And this will be a regular agenda item then?
Yes. And we'll just continue with Mrs. Abbey to review the bid results for a bus hoist.
Thank you very much. I did provide in your packet the bid results for a bus hoist, which I'm sure we all understand is the equipment that we use to raise our buses out in the mechanic garage so that we can work on our buses and work underneath the chassis. We have one of the bays where the bus hoist has been in an unsafe position for some time. Having said that, I do want you to know we did put in safety measures for that. We put in some temporary braces for those, so it isn't that we've left it unsafe, but that is a temporary measure. We did put together some architectural drawings and asked our construction manager, Auk, to provide us with construction management service on this particular project. So you do have the results of a formal bid, which was, of course, posted on Bid for Michigan and in the newspaper and on our website. We do have the results of the bid here. It was generally just a little bit less than what we had anticipated for a budget. We had put a budget together for $150,000. This is $132,500. We are recommending 2 vendors, one for the hoist, Allied Inc., the low bid at $54,919, and for the electrical work, a Monroe Electrical Company for $9,280. And I'm sure you've heard us talk about Monroe. We've certainly used them many times in the past. So with that, we are recommending the total cost of $132,500 with the work that AUK will be doing. They're doing some of the testing, they're doing the wall enclosures, they're doing the evacuation of the spoils, and as you might guess, that means the oils and whatnot that are currently in the bottom of that hoist that will need to be removed and disposed of. So let me answer any questions for you.
Mr. Johnson?
How many bus hoists do we have?
I want to say 4, but I will verify that and send it to you.
What are the conditions of the other 3?
They're okay.
Okay.
They're fine. We would be bringing more if
you thought we needed it?
we thought you needed it.
Okay, thank you.
Mrs. McDonald?
Oh, thank you. Ms. Abby, is there, well, and I don't even know if you can even answer it, but there's just such a wide spread between both bidders and the electrical and the
Yeah.
hoist, and
Yeah, and we definitely had that discussion, and as you know, that this is, AUK is very well-versed at, working with vendors and post bids and making sure that they have the resources to do that. We've used Monroe many, many times in this district. I mean, I know them as a vendor as well as our operations department and our construction manager, AUK. And they were very comfortable with Allied in providing the hoist, so.
and there was only 2 companies that were out there that could do the hoist work?
The 2 that bid, I mean, we did a bid for Michigan.
Yeah, I know.
And we put it in the newspaper.
Okay, it's just such a big difference.
And the bid for Michigan really goes out to a lot. I mean, it's, I don't know if you could think of like maybe a job posting site, where you put something up and it goes out to just tons of, anybody that has that word in their nomenclature for that, I mean, it just goes to tons and tons of vendors, so.
I mean, it's almost $200,000 different, that's a lot of money. Okay.
President Burton?
Ms. Abby, you said we have 4, and 3 are safe and usable right now, the 4th is not. I assume you're bringing this to us because we have working need to have all
Yes.
4 of those going. We can't just simply put
Absolutely.
one out of service and work on the other 3.
No, we are always maintaining buses. Either we're fixing them because something is broken, or we're doing oil changes or belt changes, or, we have over 100 buses. I believe we have 112 right now. And, we have maybe less than 20 of those are spares. So you always have to keep those spares working in case you have an accident on the road that day, or, it's 20 degrees or 20 below and something doesn't start. So yes, there is a need to keep those working at all times.
So this is for, when you say oil changes and things like that, this is for routine maintenance on our buses in addition to a repair because something broke.
Correct.
And I assume that these hoists are also used for the buses that we have contracted with the city that we service for them?
Yes, correct.
So it's in part of an expense that we use toward an income generator for us? Okay.
And if I didn't say it, this would be a sinking fund project as well.
Okay.
Resources for this.
All righty.
Any other questions? Seeing none, we can add this to the agenda,
please.
Regular agenda?
Yes.
Yes, regular, please.
And let's get Mrs. Abby on the hot seat to review the fuel
It
purchase.
is a little warm in here, isn't it?
The review of fuel purchase and waste removal.
Thank you very much. Again, this was a brief discussion that we had at our study session. So we're going to talk about 2 things. One is both our waste removal service, which is our garbage disposal service, as well as our fuel for those said buses that we have. First of all, on the waste removal services, as you know, the last 2 years we went out for bid for waste removal services. Last year we did change vendors to Rizzo Environmental Services. At that time, they had given us a quote for 3 years, but we only contracted for 1 year with Rizzo. So their contract will end this year. We did contact them, and they have agreed to hold their price, the current price that we have, the 2014-15 school year price for the next 2 years. We are very comfortable and confident with the work that they've been doing for us this year. They have really been very cooperative with Livonia Public Schools. I think I mentioned last time that, for example, if we've asked them to add canisters or delete canisters or come, 3 times a week instead of 5 times a week to a particular school, which helps us, of course, reduce our costs if they don't need to come out as much, or if it's a smaller container that they're emptying. They've been very willing to work with us, and that helps us, because our needs do change during the year sometimes. Sometimes maybe we're emptying a building and we need to add some canisters, or sometimes for whatever, maybe we're recycling more in that building, so we don't need as many waste containers. And when we don't need to do that, that's a savings for us. So we really appreciate their being flexible and working with us. And based on that, we would recommend that we engage Rizzo for the next 2 years at the current 2014-15 prices that we have.
Shall we address the fuel questions?
Well, if I can go back to Rizzo for a second, if that's okay, we'd like to actually, even though we're not going out to rebid it, we still would like the board to approve the contract.
Thank you.
And so we'd actually want to put it on the agenda that we're going to extend it for 2 years at the same price, and that way we're being transparent and upfront in regards to what we're doing with this particular contract.
Thank you, Dr. Leopold. As you recall, we talked about the fact that because it is a professional service, we don't have to bid this out every year. We have done it as we do with all professional services or fees, when we feel it's appropriate, and the board would like us to do that. So,
any other questions about the waste removal?
Are we going to,
Mrs. Bonnefield?
I'm sorry, are we going to put it on the agenda as a voting item then for April 20th?
That's what we'd like to do.
In our regular agenda?
That's what would be our recommendation.
Okay.
If the board agrees.
Thank you.
Mrs. McDonald?
Thank you. Ms. Abby, I know you mentioned the recycling, and I think initially when we did this contract, they were adding the recycling option as far as a cost-saving measure for us. How is that working?
Let me get that to you. I haven't heard any dollar amounts about it. I know we're happy with their service, but I haven't heard any exact dollar amounts as to whether that's helping out with some buildings and whether the cost of having a recycle bin is offsetting that. But I'll find out and get that to you.
Okay.
I remember there was a pilot program that we had put in at a few schools, right?
Any other questions? All right, then shall we address the fuel purchase?
Again, we have, last couple of years, gone out for bid for fuel, and we did switch last year, and this is diesel and gasoline fuel for our district vehicles, our vans and trucks, as well as our buses. And last year, we did switch to the low bidder, RKA Petroleum, and we had some discussion at our study session about going out for bid again, and you will recall that we had asked RKA if they could hold their prices, and they said no, that they couldn't, and they actually had said that they would need to increase their price by about 3 cents, and I'll talk about that in just a second. So we talked about whether it made sense to go out for bid or not, and you had asked me to go back and kind of look at the difference in prices and what happened last year, what was the difference between the high and the low bidder. I provided that information to you in your packet, or excuse me, it was actually in Dr. Leopold's update this past week, that memo from me. There isn't a big difference in the price between the low and high bidder last year, but based on just the competitiveness of gasoline right now, I think it does make sense for us to go ahead and go out for bid for fuel for both diesel and gasoline. If it's 3 cents, then, it would have been our time and effort involved, but if it's 2 3/4, then we'll save a little bit of money and it'll help a little bit. So what we would like to do, though, is try to see if we can get a more than 1 year bid. I don't know if people will do that or not, given how volatile this market is, but if we can, we'd like to get a 2 or 3 year bid price. So we will try and do that if we can. But we would like to go ahead and do that, and then when we get those results, bring that back to the board.
So that's a little different game plan than what we talked about last time, but based on the research that you asked us to do, we came to the conclusion of, we're probably better off, based on the information that we've garnered, to take a closer look at this. And so, if that's okay, but we're really looking for the direction tonight, if it's okay for us to go out and just rebid this. and look for 2-year, 3-year, 1, 2, and 3-year bids on this. And if that's the case, then we won't bring it back to you at the voting meeting. I'll come back to you at another committee meeting to look at the results of the bids. So it'll take us a little bit longer, but that's fine with us. We're okay with that. It just seemed to make more sense after we got the information that you asked for.
We're a little bit ahead right now, so. Not much, but a little bit.
That was my question, is are we still going to be able to make our timeline?
Yeah, we'll be able to make our timeline, and I would be very confident if we didn't that this company would go on a month-to-month sort of, RKA would continue to supply as we need it on a month-to-month basis, so.
Is there any other
I'd be very
questions for
confident with
Mrs.
that.
Thank you.
Okay, so we just have the waste removal on for the next bit. Thank you.
And that's the report for the Finance Committee, President Burton.
Thank you. Next item on our agenda is item 5, policy, and we will turn it over to Mrs. Bonfield.
Okay, our first agenda item is A, and what we are going to hear from Mrs. Ellis regarding the graduation requirements.
Thank you, Mrs. Bonfield. Good evening again, everyone. As Mr. Archibald shared with the Board of Education during the March 30th study session, we are bringing to the board a minor modification to the high school graduation requirements. This modification pertains to the world language requirement. Our current board policy indicates that one of the 2 world language credits can be substituted for a credit through a career technical education class. However, after further review of the legislative language, it became obvious that the substitution is for completing a career technical education program. And a career technical education program is a year-long program that includes a 2 or 3 hour block of time. Therefore, a 1 credit of world language exchange for 1 credit of career technical education is not possible. It is substituting 1 credit of world language by completing a career technical education program. And so we have made the adjustment to the graduation requirements, the high school graduation requirements that you have in your packet, to reflect that modification. So if you look at G, world languages, the first bullet stays the same, which is 2 units of the same world language, or, and now this is where we've made the change, that's in the second bullet, it states that 1 unit of the same world language and completes a career technical education program. Or, and then the third bullet stays the same, 1 unit of the same world language and 1 unit of visual performing and applied arts, in addition to the required visual performing applied arts credit. This modification will require 2 board meetings for the board to adopt these changes. In the meantime, if the board is agreeable, Mr. Archibald will begin communicating these changes to the high school. Any questions that you might have?
Mrs. Burton?
I understand what the change is. I'm just looking at this language and trying to make sure that it's clear to folks who don't read all of the high school graduation requirements as regularly as you do. A career technical education program is that 2 to 3 hour block of time. It's not.
It is correct.
It is not a 1 hour class in a home high school.
Correct.
If I remember correctly from our study session, the culinary arts program is one of the only programs that takes place in the home high school that would qualify for this because it's a 2 hour block at Franklin?
Yes.
Okay. What I'm wondering about is completes a CTE program. That can be a 1 year or a 2 year program, really. So what we're looking at is they need to complete a 1 year of a career technical education program.
Correct.
For example, the medical assisting they have MedAssist 1 and MedAssist 2. You don't have to complete both, But you have to complete a full year of a career technical education program.
That is correct. So it could be medical assistance 1 or medical assistance 2. It has to be the full year program of a multiple hour block of time.
Okay. I'm wondering if we ought to put completes 1 year of a career technical education program in that phrasing, just so folks don't misunderstand that and think they have to take 2 years of a program in order for this to qualify. So the way it would read is 1 unit of the same world language and completes a year of a career technical education program. What do you think? Just so that it's clear to folks that they need to take a year, not take 2 years.
And I think that our counselors are very clear in understanding what constitutes a career technical education program, and they provide guidance to our students as they are completing their graduation requirements.
I'm not worried so much about the counselors getting it, because they know the stuff inside and out.
Sure.
I'm more worried about our parents who are reading our requirements, because the folks who might need this have students and parents who refer to this policy, and therefore I want to make it clear to them.
They also have the list of graduation requirements in the program of study, and they have a list of graduation requirements that they check off as students complete required classes. So there's multiple places where they have opportunities to get clarification on what it constitutes a CTE program.
Mrs. Bonnefield?
My personal preference is still to leave 1 year in that language, just for clarity, but my opinion is just 1 of 7, so.
Mrs. McDonald.
Thank you, Mrs. Bonnefield. Personally, I'm okay with leaving the wording as it is. I know our counselors do a wonderful job, and as a parent, I rely on them, or have relied on them throughout the years to ensure that my student needed what she needed to be able to graduate. I don't think we need to complicate it. That's my own personal opinion. So I think it's pretty simple, and that's just my thought.
Is there anybody else? Mrs. Laura?
Thank you, Mrs. Bonnefield. Would adding the words 1 year have a negative effect on it or cause any problems that you can foresee?
I can't foresee any immediately. By leaving it out, it does provide additional flexibility in case legislation language
That's
should
what I
change,
thought, yeah.
which does occur on a regular basis.
Yeah, no kidding.
At least every other week.
Yeah.
So I think having that flexibility might work to our advantage.
Okay. I hadn't thought about the legislative portion, but yeah, it changes like a ping pong ball. Yeah.
Anybody else have any questions? Mrs. Ellis, this needs to do as a first reading?
Yes.
On April 20th?
Yes, please. Thank you very much.
I'm going to pass this to you.
Thank you.
Okay, our next item, 5B, we brought up a discussion of board bylaws versus the board policy, and what our responsibility is on presenting those at meetings. Obviously, we have to vote on both of those. So I've had Mrs. Wozniak provide us each with the BD1 and BD2, which talk about our responsibilities for policies versus the bylaws. So my reading and understanding of these is that we indeed do need to do a first reading and vote then at the second regular board meeting on bylaws. However, my interpretation of the policies
is that we can vote on those immediately. So I think one of the things we needed to do was just to make that clarity, everybody have an understanding. If we need to change the voting policies on policies, we can obviously make that change if we need to, or we probably need to move to following what our policies and bylaws actually state. Do you guys want to take a minute to read that over real quick?
I mean, really the question just is, do you want to follow the existing board policy in regards to approving policies, or do you want to stick with the existing practice, which means we would need to then adjust BD2 and change the language? That's really the decision in front of you.
Right. Does anybody have any conversation that they would like to on that? President Burton, please.
I don't have any problem with either way we go on this, but I do want our practice to reflect our policy. Right now, just for clarity for the public, we are holding ourselves to a stricter standard than our policy states. With bylaws, we give it 2 readings, as our policy states. With policies, which are just ever so slightly different, our practice is to give it 2 readings. In writing, our policy says we only have to give it 1. So we are holding ourselves to a stricter standard. I don't care which way we go on this so much. I'm flexible on that, but I do want our board to make sure that our practice and our policy are consistent with one another.
Okay, does anybody else have something that they'd like to add? Mr. Centers, please.
Well, I would just, I think by reading policies twice, it gives people another opportunity to just hear what's going on with the board. Mm-hmm. It's something we are in the practice of doing. So for me, I kind of like reading the policies twice just for that reason, transparency. But again, if there's a strong will to change, I still think we provide a lot of information out there for people, and they could still get everything that they needed if people really felt strongly about changing it. But personally, I lean toward reading policies twice.
Okay. Mr. Johnson, please.
Thank you, Ms. Bonnefield. I agree with Mr. Centers. I'm more comfortable reading them twice, and I want to make sure, and I think uniformity makes it easier for us to follow than to have one way and one the other way. That way, we're never confused. We always do it the same way. So that's my feeling on it.
Anybody else? My only question would be, and obviously we've been practicing the 2 readings with the policies, and like this last one that we did, when we need to move things into action and the board agrees, then we will proceed to start sending that out. Is there, Dr. Liggett, is there any timing issues we're going to have if we change our?
No, because that's what we've been following, so.
Okay,
I can't
so
think about,
there's not.
I mean, even if you think about what we did last special meeting, we put the 1 second reading on for the special meeting just so we could get it done by March 31st. And so, while it could cause a problem somewhere down the road, I really can't anticipate it, and the board could always hold a couple of meetings.
Extra meetings.
If really, in that unusual circumstance.
Correct. Then let's take a consensus on if we need to rewrite this policy. What I'm hearing is that more people are comfortable with rewriting the policy to go to a first reading and a second reading. Are we a consensus? Then we will rewrite that policy and we will read it for a first and second reading. Well, this is a bylaw, so it has to.
Yeah, I would just suggest just to get your minds thinking around it, and you can take a look at it and make any suggestions, but we could add in there just 1 sentence at the end that just says the board will conduct a first reading at a regular board meeting prior to voting on a policy change.
Okay.
So I just throw that out as an idea, and then you guys can read it and see if it looks right and make any suggestion changes or whatever.
Okay.
And then we'll.
Mrs. McDonald. Thank you, Mrs. Bonnefield. So would we be looking at this at our next study session, or is this something that we're going to start voting on next, or at least have our first reading next week?
I would assume that this needs to go to at least one study,
Okay.
no.
I don't know that it has to go to a study session if we're already in agreement that we're going to rewrite this so that it reflects current practice. We're not, my opinion is if we're not changing our practice, but we're merely
reflecting
adding a couple sentences to make sure that our policy reflects our practice. My opinion is it does not need to go to a study session to do that, especially since we are having a first reading and a second reading in order to put it into practice.
It is a bylaw, so in that case, we do have to do it twice anyway.
Yep.
Mrs. Jarvis.
In the interest of considering all sides, I'm curious to know why we were considering the change in the first place, if we're interested in keeping it the way it is. And also, my understanding with policies is that they should be a little more flexible and easier to change than bylaws. And if we make it the same as the bylaws, then we're losing that flexibility.
Mr. Johnson.
I don't know that we're necessarily losing any flexibility. It's just the process by which we are approving the change. We can always, maybe I'm misunderstanding, but I don't see it as a loss of the flexibility. It's just in the way that we are doing it. Maybe I'm misunderstanding.
Mrs. Laura.
Thank you. Just out of curiosity, and since I'm the historian, but I don't know the answer to this, maybe somebody else does. Just out of curiosity, I would be interested in knowing where and when and how did that change? If it was written that policy was voted on after the first reading, why did that change and when did that change?
Well, the bylaw here was in 1988, so you got to go back a long time. That's the last
But
time
with the policies.
That's the last time that bylaw's been changed in regards to how you formulate a policy.
Okay.
So I think that one's
That
lost
was
in
way
there.
back. I might have a reference on that, though. I'll see if I can come up with something.
Mrs. Burton.
In answer to your question, Mrs. Jarvis, in this last year and a half process where we've been going through all of the policies and all of the bylaws, I know that's where it kind of came up as a back of your head question, like, hey, how, what is exactly the differentiation? And we dug a little bit deeper. I know, Dr. Lipa, you and I had a question about something and went back to refer to it, and that's when we discovered that, hey, wait a minute, we do have a difference in our policy, that our policy in writing is more lenient than our actual practice is, and we ought to get those two in line with one another.
Thank you.
Mrs. McDonald.
Thank you, Mrs. Bonnefield. This doesn't have anything to do with Robert's Rule of Order as far as adopting policies. I don't know
if it's
that-
necessarily in Robert's rules. It's something that we can probably check on. I think usually in practice, a bylaw usually needs to be taken, it is obviously a higher standard and it needs to be taken, I don't know, I'm not saying not with more serious,
Yeah, I
but
don't
usually in like a membership organization, a bylaw has to go to the entire membership for a vote, where our policies are more like standing rules, where the board can usually just change those, because a standing rule is basically saying how we're going to operate and what we're going to do. It doesn't change the course or the action of the organization. It just says, hey, this is the way that we do things. And so it's held to a much lower standard of acceptance. I think we've sort of come, at some point, the bylaws and the policies have really started for us to sort of meld into one. We haven't really picked apart which is necessarily which, and we've been holding everything to the same standard. I think the whole reason that this came up was that there was a question on it, and we really need our documents to follow our procedures. If we feel that we need to hold the policies to the standard of being taken to 2 separate voting meetings, whether it be for transparency or comfort level, whatever that might be, then we can go there, but certainly voting at it at one meeting and not having a first reading is not anything that is out of the ordinary or substandard. It would be a regular practice for a board. I think a lot just depends on what our comfort level is and how we reflect that. Mr. Johnson, sorry.
Maybe I can give you, and the more I thought about it, a different example as to the difference between a bylaw and a policy. And I think in terms of a corporate setting, that a bylaw dictates how the organization is run and structured. For instance, you will have bylaws that says, we as the organization, whatever it is, we will have meetings every month. We will have X number of board of directors. We will have these types of things. Those are your bylaws. Policies may be more directed at the business of that organization and one level below. Maybe that's what you're thinking of, the flexibility. And the more I gave it some thought, I think there is a bit of a difference in what the bylaws do and what the policies do. Whether or not that dictates into a different method of which you change those or not, I don't know the answer to that question.
Again, I think it comes down to if we feel we need to hold ourselves to a higher standard, our documents just need to reflect our practice. President Burton.
The other thing that just dawned on me, since our bylaws and our policies are intermingled in one book, it just reduces the chance for error if we revise both in the same manner, which is what we do now.
That's what we do now.
Also, Mrs. McDonald, in reference to your question with Robert's rules, I'm not sure if the policy question that we're discussing is referred to in Robert's rules or not, but I do know that our policies say that we will generally follow Robert's rules of order unless they are in conflict with our policies or bylaws. So regardless, we're free to do it, whether it's stated in Robert's rules or not.
Yeah, I just wondered where it came from.
Where it came from, I don't know. Yep.
Yeah.
Why did it change?
Okay, my board friends, what is our, I'm
We can add a sentence, I don't care.
kind of drifted, so,
Let's just keep
let's go back again. Are we,
change it.
what's my question? Are we still in consensus that we want to change it to have 2 readings?
I would prefer to have 2 readings.
I would prefer 2 readings.
Mrs. Jarvis?
I have no preference.
Okay. Who am I missing?
I like the 2 readings personally.
Okay,
You got it.
so we're in consensus that we would like to move to, we'll write it up. And then the second question was, do we want to take it to a non-voting meeting, or are we comfortable with reading it in our packets and then, first reading, we'll have a first reading. Do we need to talk about it at a committee meeting before we take it to a first reading? Are we all good with going right straight to a first meeting?
I'm good with
First reading.
You guys can always make suggestions at that first reading.
Absolutely.
And change it if
Right.
you need to.
That is the whole point of a first reading and a second reading, is so that we have ample opportunity to flush out any little tweaks and changes in wording and so forth. So
Okay.
I'm fine with it.
So I will put this on as a first reading at that meeting, and I will have something written up for the Thursday packet. Okay, all right, we're all good with this topic, okay. Our last, yes? Okay, our last topic is 5C, Board Operating Procedures and Code of Ethics. Right now, we still have some operating procedures to go through and discuss. We are not ready to take the board operating procedures to a vote, but we are ready to take the code of ethics to a vote. So the question stands, we will vote on the code of ethics. Actually, we need to take the code of ethics to a first reading at the August 20th meeting.
How about the April 20th?
How about the April 20th meeting? Okay, first reading. Okay.
Excuse me?
Yes, ma'am.
We aren't going to talk about this at all, or?
We're not going to talk about?
The code of ethics tonight.
I'm sorry, do you have a comment, Mrs. McDonald, that you'd like to make?
I do.
Okay.
I'm still going to make the same statement that I did at our subcommittee meeting, and that is that I'm not comfortable for myself changing the code of ethics to state that, and sign this stating that we have to follow established board operating procedures for additional information without having this completed.
Okay, I can pass this out. This is what we did complete this section.
No, but I'm saying,
well, the one section that we're referring to is the section that we completed so that we could pass the code of ethics. And I can pass that wording out. Is what the conclusion, the reason we're not finishing up the other portion is that we sort of got waylaid on this one section and spent a substantial amount of time on it. And we have not given the appropriate time and consideration to the rest of the document.
Mrs. Bonfield?
Yes, ma'am.
This is, just for the benefit of the public, this is what we're looking at right now is what we discussed and came to consensus on at our last study session and what was emailed to all of us at your request, Mrs. McDonald, immediately after. I think I got it out the next morning to you at your request. That's without any further changes from that meeting, too.
no, I understand, but I'm still not comfortable with the wording, and and just so the public knows what it says, it's in reference to our board operating procedure that requests for the superintendent to provide documentation or reports shall be made by the majority of the board members to the superintendent. And then it states within 2 weeks, the superintendent shall respond by providing copies of materials to all board members or provide reports as directed by the board. And I still personally feel like this is tying the hands of the board. I don't think it's unreasonable for a board member to ask for documentation and to have it go through the board president, and then the board president send the information on to the superintendent, and then all board members receive that. I'm in total agreement on that. I don't feel comfortable. I don't think it's in the era of transparency. I just think that if a board member needs information prior to a board voting meeting on an item that's going to be voted on, that we should be able to have access to it immediately. And not even, and I'm in agreement, not one individual person should have this. I totally don't disagree with anyone's concern on that. However, to have to wait 2 weeks after something that we potentially could have already voted on, I just don't think that's the appropriate way for the board to handle that. So I've been struggling. I've been struggling for the last 2 months. We've been having these discussions, and I just don't, for me, it's not the right thing to do. And I understand if everyone else feels that way, that, that they can wait.
My question is I don't think there was ever a suggestion that we wait 2 weeks. I think that we are expected to get an answer within 2 weeks. That anything that's needed.
But if it's something that we've already voted on, then it's kind of a moot point. Yeah, and that's my concern, you know.
So I think, you know, some of the things that we've talked about is, you know, we've gone over this, we've spent over 6 hours on this.
I understand.
We have
It's been very
confirmed with
stressful.
the MASB. We had Scott Morrell come in specifically for this item from the MASB to give us guidance on this. I don't think that there's any attempt here to squelch any questions or information. Quite honestly, from the feedback that we got from the board in our discussions is that the reason that we did spend so much time on this was that there was a lack of transparency when one board member was obtaining information without the knowledge of the rest of the board members, and that not any one of us can operate as an individual with a sole purpose. And I think right now, under the circumstances, personally, as the chair, I feel that it's time to move on, that we have spent a considerable amount of time on this, and I think personally I'd like to take a consensus of the board on whether or not we would like to move on with this, and we really need to move forward. We have a lot of other issues that we need to deal with. I think that we have spent an excessive amount of time and went above and beyond to get information and references to follow board practices. Is there anybody that feels that they are obviously, Mrs. McDonald, I hear what you're saying. Is there anybody else at this time that feels that we need to spend more time on this issue, or are we comfortable with moving this forward as a first reading at the next meeting? Mrs. Laura.
If I may, I know that we spent a lot of time on this. Mrs. McDonald, again.
That's fine.
Have you've mulled this over a lot.
I have.
Have you come up with any suggestions of what would make you comfortable?
Yeah, absolutely, I can.
Can you share those?
I would be comfortable with requests to the superintendent to provide documentation or reports shall, by any individual or by any one board member, goes to the superintendent. Well, actually, I think it should go through the board president. And then the board president requests the information to the superintendent, and then the superintendent would disperse the information to all board members.
Mrs. Donovan? The only problem that I have with that is that as an individual board member, we don't have the legal authority to direct the superintendent.
I'm asking you to get the information, though.
Pardon?
I'm sending the request through the board president.
Right, the board president.
You know what,
has already-
I called, you know, I think, well, I don't have a lot of time during the day, but I did call Canton Schools and ask them what their procedures were. And the board secretary told me that what they do is exactly that if a board member has a request for information, that it goes to the board president, and the board president contacts the superintendent, and the superintendent dispels the information to all the board members. And I'm not in disagreement with everybody getting information if any of us request anything.
I think part of the problem that we're having here is that this is not about every single question that we are asking. If we have a question on an agenda item, we have the latitude to ask those questions. What we're talking about, and you guys can correct me if I am wrong, what we're talking about here is directing the superintendent or directing the staff to
Well, it says to provide documentation.
I mean,
right.
You folks can do whatever you like. I just know I'm not
We're not changing, I don't think we're changing our procedures. We're asking a question on documentation that already exists. If we can obviously call Randy and say, Dr. Leopa, and say, I have a question on this check or this document, and he can give us an answer, or he can direct one of the cabinet members to give us an answer. What we're talking about is directing the staff to do work or to find out things that are not already out there. We're not trying to not ask questions about voting items. This is about directing the staff to do additional work that's not already been done. Mrs. President Burton.
I think it should be recognized also that our board meets almost every Monday night and has ample opportunity to discuss at any time any board member's requests. And again, it's up to the majority of the board to direct the superintendent. As an individual, I don't have a legal right to do so, whether I'm the president or not. It doesn't matter. It has to come from a majority of the board, and I don't think this board has ever gotten in a position where we have said we are not going to honor board members' requests to do things, or to request documentation. Rather, what this is trying to do is to set a procedure similar to what we just did with our policy talk, so that we will all follow the same procedure. That, I believe, is what we're doing with this policy. We're saying individually we don't have that legal right. Collectively, we absolutely do, and let's make sure we're all going to follow the same procedures together and make sure that we all get the same information together so that we can perform as one cohesive board as opposed to 7 individuals.
Correct.
I like the procedure because I think it provides a respectful relationship with other board members. If I have something that's a concern, it encourages me to talk and have that dialogue with everyone. Also, I like the procedure being in place that if we want information from a superintendent, the majority of the board has a process to do that. So I think we look at it as trying to keep a board member from getting information. I think that's the concern there, but it also provides us with the procedure that if we need information from the superintendent and his designees, we have a procedure in place to get that information. So that's how I see it and read it.
Mrs. McDonald.
Okay. And I respect your opinion on this,
Yeah.
but what if the majority of the board doesn't feel that, let's say if I personally wanted to see, along with everybody else, to have the availability to do this, an invoice for whatever, a construction project or the waste removal. You know, I think as far as transparency and board oversight, I think that's not our job to do that. I don't think that, I guess maybe I'm just not confident that if I'm asked the board members that I would like to review check, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and the majority of the board didn't feel that it was a thing that was necessary because they didn't feel that it was part of our duties as board members as far as getting into day-to-day activities of the school district, that it wouldn't happen. And I guess that's my concern. I mean, that is my concern. It's not, I guess, that is my concern. So.
Mrs. Jarvis.
I appreciate your concern, and I understand where you're coming from. However, it occurs to me that if you feel very strongly, or if any of us feels very strongly about an issue, we should be able to convince the others that it is a legitimate concern. And if that's not possible, then I would question how important that issue is. If it's a valid concern, then we all have the same interest at heart.
Oh, I understand.
So it would seem to me that you would have the task of expressing your concern, and if it's a legitimate concern, we would certainly all be right there with you. The other thought that I had is that the superintendent is the employee of the school board. He's not my employee, he's not his employee, he's not your employee. So any work we direct should be directed as a school board, which requires a majority.
President Burton.
Mrs. McDonald, your example of an invoice is a very good one, and it's a very valid. If something appears to be unusual, it absolutely needs to be looked at. However, in our last study session, we addressed this very issue and suggested that we as a board, not any one individual board member, but as a board, any and every board member who has any questions on any invoices or checks, first off, contact Dr. Liepa, or as he has designated, Ms. Abby, directly and ask her, what's this check about? And find out what's happening. If we are not satisfied, we all discussed and agreed at our last study session that we would not only try to look at it individually as just one person, but rather we would keep a list, and whether that be on a monthly or a quarterly basis or whatever is appropriate, rather than sending it to an individual board member, we would have our accountant look at that and have a special audit into those specific requested checks and invoices so that it is looked at absolutely by professionals who are trained in dealing with this material, and that the response would get back to all board members, and board members would not have copies of invoices and checks in their homes, which is not the appropriate place for that material to be. It is appropriate for it to be in our auditor's office, and by all means, this board was in agreement with your statement to the point that we agreed to change how we behave and how we handle this very question, to the point of agreeing that we would send those things to our auditors, who are better trained than any one of us sitting at this table to determine whether or not we have issues or not. I mean, those things, if there's questions with checks or invoices, they absolutely need to be brought to the attention of our auditors. Those are the folks who we pay a significant amount of money to make sure things are on the up and up. And that's if we're not satisfied with the questions or the answers that we're being given, because we are absolutely at liberty at any time to ask questions on these issues. But what this board agreed to do is to send it to the auditors if we have any questions further. And they would get back with us on it. So I just want to make sure that you know that this board was in agreement in how to handle your very example and your very question. I thought you were in agreement with that also. But if it's not how you want the board to handle it, maybe we shouldn't handle it in that way. But we were trying very hard to make sure that that request was complied with in as professional a manner as it could be.
I'd like to say I think we're missing one very key point here, that we have actually gone to MASB training on, and that is the trust issue. And if there is so little trust between the board members that we don't feel that we're all on the same page, and that we don't feel that everyone on this board has the best interest of the school district at heart, I think there's some deeper problems here than just whether or not we're going to pull some invoices or documents. And that's very troublesome to me. We talked a lot about trust. Many of us took a weekend of our time to sit through seminars to avoid situations just like this. Many of us go to ongoing education training to make sure that we understand our positions and how to function as a board. And I find it very distressing that there is even an innuendo that some of us are not trustworthy and don't have the best thoughts about it, are not trying their best to run this district as it is appropriate and act appropriately as board members. Does anybody else have any comments that they would like to make? What is the consensus on the first reading of taking the Code of Ethics for first reading at the April 20th meeting?
First reading.
Mrs. Jarvis?
First reading.
Mr. Centers?
First reading.
President Burton?
First reading is fine with me.
Mrs. Laura?
First reading.
Mrs. McDonald?
You know, my feelings on this, I just,
Okay. We will take it to a first reading and the April 20th agenda. That, Mrs. Burton, that will conclude Policy Committee.
Thank you. That is the last item on our agenda. Again, I would like to give a very hearty thank you to the Jackson staff, specifically to Gail, Federico, to Shannon, Laura, and Nancy, who gave us just a heartwarming and very informative look into the day-to-day life of the Jackson Center. The more and more information that comes out about the importance of early childhood education, starting with the very little ones. It's heartwarming to see that Livonia Public Schools offer such a wide variety of early childhood education. It was also heartwarming to see how some of our older students with special needs are very much incorporated into the community of our younger ones. It's absolutely a reflection of our community as a whole. So I would like to just give my heartwarm thank you to the folks at the Jackson Center for welcoming us this evening. That is the last item on our agenda tonight, and I wish you all a good evening. Thank you.